the Evolution Security Podcast. Well, everybody, once again, welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast. I'm excited to be here. I know that my brother is excited to be here because we've got a guest we've literally talked about having on for years.
Yep, literally.
And we just know how busy she is, so we finally decided to track her down and ask her to come on, and that is Miss Tiffany Johnson. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and mention a few of your accolades and your experience. There's just too many to put in here right now, so I'm going to read some highlights here. So, first and foremost, right now you are an instructor for the Citizens Safety Academy.
Right.
You are a Rangemaster Master level instructor certified there, and you're a Rangemaster defensive shotgun instructor. You have multiple NRA instructor certifications, and one thing I found interesting is you are a USCCA Training Councelor. You are also a practicing attorney, I believe, in 3 different states. And last but definitely not least, the ringmaster of the amazing Tac-Con. So that's just a handful of the things that you delve into all the time. So it's an honor to have someone like you that has the breadth of knowledge and experience that you do, and you're actually a gem within the training community. People who know Tiffany. So with all that said, Tiffany, why don't you give us a quick background of yourself to introduce yourself to our listeners that may not know you?
Well, first of all, thank you for the amazing intro. I wish I could take you around to introduce me everywhere I go. You made me sound kind of awesome.
Because you are.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I'll correct you on one thing, though. I am not the ringmaster of Tac-Con. That would be Tom.
Okay.
And I'm the one who runs around and puts out fires and makes sure that Tom has no reason to get angry. That's my job.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but we all look at you as a ringmaster, but okay.
And I think, Tom can correct us that I thought I heard him basically say that you are the ringmaster.
That's where I got it in my head.
That too. He likes starting rumors, but Tac-Con started with Tom, and that he's the one who built it and made it what it is. I am just really grateful to play a small role, and hopefully not get kicked out. I like making sure that everybody who's there has the time of their life, and it really is a highlight of my year. So that's why I'm so busy and so visible at Tac-Con, because it just warms my heart to see all the attendees having fun, to see the instructors getting to go around and train from their colleagues, and watching Tom and Lynn just kind of kick back and enjoy the show. That's what the staff really, really likes to see.
Awesome.
Killer.
Well, then go ahead then. Give us some of your background. I mean, hey, you can even start with the hospital you were born in if you want to go that far back. That's a joke, but not a joke. You give us as much info as you'd like to share.
Well, since you took it there, I'll share a fun fact about me. I was a surprise. I called myself my twin brother's birthday present. Because my mom was having a boy. She had no idea I was there. My brother popped out, and the doctor said, "Hey, there's another one in there." And that was me.
Okay. Sorry to interject. I am that surprised too.
Are you really?
The doctor said, "There's another one," after Eric was born. And and my mom said, "Another what?" And he said, "What do you think we're doing here? It's another baby." So we have that in common. That's wild.
That is crazy. So, yep. So you're a birthday present too. Yep. But that's how it all started. And I guess the relevant part of my history here is that for up until early adulthood, I was not a gun person at all. I was terrified of guns, and I associated guns with a lot of negative experiences and losses in my life. And so I actually took my first gun class out of frustration because there was this sort of nebulous thing that frightened me and I didn't know anything about it. And it kept taking my friends away. And I was angry and felt out of control and just wanted to have a better vocabulary about why I had this disdain for guns. I didn't like not liking something while also not knowing anything about it. So that's what took me to my first gun class. And it was just sheer dumb luck that the class was at Rangemaster, which happened to be down the street from my house at the time. That was how I met Tom and the Rangemaster crew. And the rest is history. I immediately realized that I had subscribed to a lot of misinformation and I was desperately curious to learn more. And so I signed up that night for the next class in Tom's curriculum, and I've been following him around ever since.
Awesome.
Well, Tiffany, can I interject something there? This Eric, of course, here. It's awesome to have you on. What I was going to say is, and I think that I had heard that. I think that I had heard you say that before on another podcast. And all I have to say is that, man, just isn't it amazing that you could have lived right next to Rangemaster? I mean, it's hard to think of. I mean, another place like maybe Gun Sight, or you can name a few others, but Rangemaster being right there, and you being essentially against guns at this point, or just at least as you said, afraid of them.
Mhm.
And then you choose one of the best locations to start your training path. I think that's awesome.
It really is. I mean, what are the odds? I I wish I could claim that I actually did research and chose Rangemaster because of its reputation, but I didn't. I went there because it was down the street from my house and they had an opening that weekend. That was it. And so it was just pure luck, blessing, and it's that experience really does inform my teaching philosophy because I realized how much was at stake with that very first encounter. And so, if I had gone to any other class and gotten a subpar experience from a subpar instructor, my path for these last 25 years would have been very, very different.
Yeah, that is amazing. It's sometimes it's we take for granted the lives that we've been born into by chance, and just where we live, right? I mean, the freedoms that we have, especially for firearms, since we're talking about firearms, the fact that we were all born here. But it's do you remember what the name of the class was?
It was a permit class, handgun carry
And
permit.
who was teaching it as well?
So Tom was there. He wasn't the lead instructor, but he was there, and another one of his leads was teaching. So see that it was that weekend that I met a lot of the Rangemaster crew. We call it the mothership. Um, so yeah, it was a fun ride, and it's interesting. Tom and I. Um, I can give you a dozen reasons why Tom and I should be like oil and water. Like we're very different, and it would have been easy for us to not get along. But I think a combination of his open mind and my open mind allowed us to find that common ground and learn from one another. And the fact that he was willing to put up with my, misinformation, my ignorance, and indulge me and bring me along. And I'm really glad that I was patient enough to actually hear him out rather than just clinging to my misconceptions. All of that worked to, I would like to think it worked to both of our advantage. I know it certainly worked to my advantage, and I've been benefiting from it ever since.
Well, Tiffany, I do have a quick question, and this is something that Aaron and I have talked about for some time. We're fairly new to the Rangemaster family per se. I mean, we've been following what Rangemaster has been doing for many, many years, but Aaron and I just started our IDC classes. I guess, so would it have been? It had been almost 5 years ago, and we just had our first Tac-Con a couple of years ago as well. And what we discovered is, Tom can be a hard ass at times, right? But
Yeah.
here's the one thing that we also noticed and talk about all the time is he really cares for those around him, like deeply cares. Am I wrong in that?
You are not wrong. He absolutely does care. He is loyal to a fault, and he really takes seriously his stewardship of the body of knowledge that he has amassed over the years. It's not lost on him how invaluable that is, how much it can benefit the lives of others, and what a responsibility it is to share that message with as little as possible being lost in translation. All of that is weighing on Tom every time he starts a class. He never starts a class cavalierly. Every single one of them is, kind of the weight of the world on his shoulders. And it really is important to him that his students actually get it. He's not doing this just, as a pastime. He wants his students' lives to be affected by what they learn from him. And I think that's part of what makes him such an impactful instructor, even in spite of him, shall we say, not winning any customer service awards or Miss Congeniality or anything like that. That's not Tom.
Well, I can say so, and I want to get into this. We met at this particular class. I'll talk about it here in a second, exactly what it was. But I was doing a shooting drill, and I think it was because of the habit of being on ranges where they kind of wanted you to shoot dry, and I was sitting there with a slide back, no ammo, and he came up and don't sit there with an empty gun. Load that gun. Goes, and I guess I had done it a couple of times, and he goes, he walked off. That's a strange effing habit. Dang, man.
Yeah,
I mean, he definitely showed that he was not happy with what I was doing, but I kept showing up to some of his classes, definitely, because it really is the way that you're talking about it is the information not getting lost in translation, the amount of information and experience that he can convey. It does come across as very filtered to precise language, and people know exactly why we're working on things in his classes and why he's teaching it. Now, what I do want to bring up, and I want to really, really focus this on you. The fact is that you and I first met. It was in 2016 at one of the last couple, I believe, establishing dominance paradigm classes. And I mean, I'll tell you, I'm honored that I was able to go to such a class, which, as some listeners may know, but it was actually a class put on by Tom Givens, Craig Douglas, and the late, great, amazing William April, Dr. William April, who we now miss greatly. him passing away a few years ago. Now, but you were there. You were helping wrangle everything, kind of what you do at Tac-Con, to be honest. But and being very supportive of everybody, especially when Tom would make some of us cry. That's a joke, but at the same time, one of the major roles you did play was actually some encouragement. But what you did do is you were the main role player with all the students, along with Craig Douglas. So there were a couple of, I think, one of the scenarios where you and I went on a date and we're getting in our car, and then
carjacking.
yeah, and it was Kirk and Craig, and all I remember is Craig opened the door, and I think he had a knife, and he goes, "I'm gonna stick this bitch. I'm gonna stick this bitch."
Yeah, I got stabbed many times that weekend.
and so I did my best to cut Craig down with the Sims gun, but all the joking aside, that was an incredible class. The psychological aspects, the criminal psychology, and frankly profile that William presented, and of course the great shooting aspects that Tom gave, and then the role playing with Craig. It was just an invaluable class. I didn't realize how special it was when I went.
Well, I appreciate that. It is one of my all-time favorite classes. And when William passed away, we did retire the class. If anybody is interested, there's still a write-up on it at rangemaster.com, but they're not offering it anymore just because how do you replace William April, you know? But it was the brainchild of Tom and William and Craig, and they each brought a unique slice of that pie. And I really thought that the sum was greater than the parts. You know, when they all brought their parts. You know, Tom with the tactics and the marksmanship, and then Craig with the real life application aspect of it, and then William with his psychological debrief and his analysis and the way he was able to pick apart everything that everyone did and really push folks to think about it. It was golden. It was a magical 3-day weekend. And I hate that, you know, that it was ended so abruptly, but like you, I'm glad that we got to run it. I think it ran 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Well,
It
that
was a great
sounds right to me. I think I was there on the second or third year. Yeah.
Well, and if I can add, I'm jealous that I never got to go. And the time that Aaron went, I think I might have been deployed at the time. And then there was another opportunity that work got in the way again. So I was extremely disappointed that I did not get to go. But, you know, just kind of doubling down on Dr. William April's contribution to our frankly our path, all of us that are serious about self-protection. We talk about all the time on this show about how important the mental cues, the mental maps that you can develop even just from hearing things,
Yes.
and how valuable that was that William, you know, imparted in us. And also I'm kind of juxtaposing that with, unfortunately, there are a lot of individuals out there that have purchased firearms, and in many cases carrying firearms, that don't have any of that understanding that frankly can save their lives, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's irresponsible to strap a gun on if you haven't done at least equal parts training on how not to ever need to use your gun.
Yeah.
Anybody that's itching to use a gun in self-defense, I think, should not be armed. That's my personal opinion. You didn't ask for it, but there it is.
No. We want to hear and you know, Tiffany, Aaron and I say this all the time. We say that we do not believe in a prerequisite of training to exercise your Second Amendment rights. But we absolutely advocate that everyone should have training. So
Right.
that may seem somewhat contradictory, but everybody should have training, and they certainly should go down the training route that that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think there's a huge difference between requirements being imposed on you by a government entity versus your owning your own responsibility
Hmm.
as a human being and a citizen of society and as a beneficiary of the codification of our human rights. It's your responsibility to, to exercise that right in a way that ensures it can be enjoyed for generations to come. And
Mm.
it's only through sloppy exercise of our rights that we endanger them. So that's why I think if you're going to carry a gun, it comes with an obligation to arm yourself with more than just ammunition.
Man, that's a good heck of a point there. Awesome.
Well, and if I can, I was a little bit ill prepared because I don't have the story in front of me, but I don't. I'll ask you guys. I think it was not too long ago. I mean, we're talking within 6 months, maybe max a year. And this was in Arizona, I believe, or New Mexico, either one. Again, I'm going to grab the story and put it up. But unfortunately, this individual, and it was protest, counter protest over a statue, and unfortunately, there was a physical confrontation that was not a threat of death or grave bodily injury, and the guy jumped over the wall so he's over a small wall. These individuals that were wrestling with him could not get to him, and he could easily run away or have plenty of space. Well, man, I mean, you could tell the guy, he's carrying an appendix rig, and he draws, bang. I mean, but he did. You could tell he didn't even get his pistol up into sight line. That's not necessary for certain shots, but anyway, it was just an executed appendix draw and shoots a guy. Completely, in my opinion, unjustified. But kind of what we're talking about is that it's the responsibility of people to get training where they don't make stupid decisions like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think in a perfect world, the Second Amendment would be, it would not be debatable. Like it wouldn't be an arguable point. But the more we make questionable decisions with our rights, any right, the more that right becomes, at least in some people's eyes, debatable. And so that's another reason why maybe it's selfish of me, why I really wish everyone who decided to carry a gun would at least invest in some kind of training and not just marksmanship, but training about decision making and about what Craig Douglas calls verbal agility and
Yes.
thin slicing and avoidance techniques. I mean, I it's unsexy to tell people that they should stay out of trouble. But if you're gonna strap on a gun, that's exactly what you should try to do. I am much more likely to walk the other way if I'm armed than if I'm not, precisely because I don't want to have to get myself out of trouble. I'd rather not get into it in the first place.
Well, and Tiffany, thinking about that, I mean, I know we probably all agree on a certain permutation of this, but you having that gun on you, if it does become a physical altercation, it's already a gunfight because you brought a
You brought
gun
it.
to the
Yeah.
fight, even if it has not been deployed. And that's another aspect that people don't realize when they let their ego, charge them up, and they're armed, and possibly in this case of that situation that I'm mentioning. But yeah, you brought a gun, so it's a gunfight whether it's been deployed or not.
Agreed. We sort of took a detour earlier, but you mentioned that I teach for Citizen Safety Academy, and the owner of that company is Akil Kadir, and he's my training partner. I think the world of Akil, and this is one of the concepts that he teaches that we all teach for CSA in our permit classes, in our regular, everyday earth people type classes, where many of the students are touching a gun for the first time in their life, are entering the EDC culture brand new. And we spend a lot of time reminding people that, hey, this is an obligation. It's no different from buying a chainsaw or a car or a, bucket of arsenic. I mean, you can't just cavalierly own something like that. You've got to step up your awareness game, your skill level, and your commitment to responsibility. And so we teach our students, you've got to be conscious about your surroundings. You've got to go above and beyond to avoid trouble. And strapping on a gun should not make you feel stronger. It shouldn't be some kind of superhero cloak. If anything, it should be accompanied by humility and hesitation. Because if I've got a gun, like you said, any conflict that I get into is a gunfight. And so I want to avoid that to the extent possible. And it has nothing to do with courage or fear or anything like that. It's about responsibility.
Excellent.
Yep. And I've heard it mentioned multiple times from multiple people that, yeah, you may end up having a justified shooting in that instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you simply would have avoided the situation, a person didn't have to either be, maimed or lost their life, even if it was justified. It's just that simple. It's that simple act of, being able to say no to your impulse or ego. And I would like to think that, myself, I know you two across from me. I mean, I think way different than I did when I was young, and some of that isn't just because I was young. It's because the amount of awesome training and people that have mentored us over the years that made us think differently,
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the Rangemaster principles is reluctant willingness. And
Yeah, I love
reluctant
that.
willingness is you're going to do everything in your power to avoid having to resort to deadly force. But if the flag flies, there's no holds barred. Like, you're diving in full fledged and you're not giving up until and unless you prevent. Like, it's just, everything. There's no timidness, there's no hesitation, there's no equivocation. I mean, if that flag flies, then we're talking blood, guts, spit, shit, fists, feet, makeshift lamps, rugs, whatever. So we're either all the way out and doing whatever we can to not be in it. But if we are in it, then there's no such thing as cheating when your life's on the line. You do whatever
Amen.
you have to do to get home.
Heck no.
Amen.
Well, Tiffany, in the Citizen Safety Academy, can you give a broad, I mean, you can get as detailed as you want, what your guys' primary mission or missions are?
Yeah. Primary mission is to enable and inform everyone, every walk of life, about self-preservation and the tools available toward that end. So it's not just about guns. It's not just about shooting. It's really about self-actualization and autonomy. It's about owning
Awesome.
your lot on this earth and in this life, and everything that you can do to make the most of our limited time and space here. So the majority of that manifests as training on our part in some way or another. We've carved out kind of a huge lane for ourselves in what we call gateway instruction. And gateway instruction is a style of teaching that is student centered and geared towards introducing the student towards a brand new skill that he or she has never encountered before and may in fact be repelled by, either because of fear or trauma or what have you. So it's a very specific technique that I think most people don't use, actually, even instructors that teach so-called beginner classes. Gateway instruction is all about tailoring the style of teaching to that student who is reluctant without judging the student for that reluctance.
Hmm. So does that mean that if you have, say, 10 people sign up for the gateway, now it's the gateway instructor class, I guess maybe I'm thinking about, is that what you're referring to as teaching people as gateway instructors, or is
Yeah,
it both?
it's both. Yeah. So when Akil and I met, we immediately clicked over this concept of how to create a learning environment that was welcoming to all people.
Yeah.
And that developed into the concept of gateway instruction. And as we traveled and taught through this gateway instruction method, we started getting asked, people started asking us, can you teach us how to do that? And so that's how the gateway instructor curriculum and the gateway instructor certification course came to be. So we do have a 3-day instructor development course called the Gateway Instructor
Hmm.
Certification. And it is not just, it's not just a, instructor development course. It's not your standard run of the mill instructor development course. It is specifically about teaching beginners, teaching people who've never touched a gun before, because that requires a whole different skill set than teaching people who already have a basic understanding or are already acclimated to the culture.
Well,
Excellent.
I'm certainly, I know Aaron and I would be interested in that too, because that's a passion of ours as well. I would like to think that Aaron and I have done a decent job with brand new shooters, but I'm sure there's absolutely plenty that we could learn from you guys. And to kind of double down too, we kind of feel like we also have a segment within what we do for the combatives realm too, because not everybody wants to jump into an ECQC, although they should. But there is, in many cases, folks self-select out of that. There's possibly a lot of fear, for that.
Sure.
And so we are also trying to bridge that gap in that area as well, where, we're not using Sims, we're using blue guns, and the Evos are we really say, hey, listen, if you're the good guy, you're the bad guy, this is their experience. We learned that from Cecil Birch, by the way.
Yep.
And we make sure we dial down those scenarios to where it's not a complete competitive event. And I think it's going to do better for folks that really are interested in getting those types of classes. So we're working on getting more of those taught.
That sounds great. And we do need more gateway instruction in the combatives space, because I think combatives has gotten there's a little bit of misunderstanding in the training world about where combatives fit in.
Mhm.
It's almost assumed that you do combatives after you've gained proficiency with the firearm. But to me, it's kind of the other way around, or at least you don't have to have experience with a firearm before you can consider um, combatives. However, that would require a very skillfully taught entry level combatives course by somebody who understands gateway instruction principles, because it can be intimidating.
Yep.
And I think the biggest mistake that people make is judging people's reasons for not doing this or doing that. And the reality is the reasons are kind of irrelevant, right? If I decide that I'm not cut out for BJJ, it doesn't really matter to somebody who wants me to be exposed to that. It doesn't really matter what my reason is. At least not as far as you as an instructor are going to decide whether my reason is good or bad, right? I mean, you may want to know why so that you can help me overcome that barrier, but you shouldn't, as the instructor, want to know why just to tell me that I'm wrong. You know,
Right.
I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think that's a problem that only widens the gap between people looking through the window of the training world and people who actually walk through.
Very, very well said. And you mentioned BJJ. To some people, they may have trauma in their background. You know, especially our lady friends could have had trauma that being that close to someone, especially men, could be a problem. And so I love what you're saying because um, we believe that everybody should do jujitsu. We also believe that it's not for everyone.
Mm.
And then if you do have instances where a person has some form of a pathology around not wanting to do it, you got to recognize that, and help them as far as you can. But if they don't want to, they don't want to. But let them sit on the side, see how safe it is. Maybe they feel more comfortable at that point. Maybe they decide to, participate in, later in the class, or maybe it's that they're ready to come next time. So no, that's very well put. And I had heard you guys talk about it, and I love those philosophies. It needs to be a lot more of it for certain.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, and I want to comment too, because that was one of the things that particular class, especially the Gateway Instructor Development class. But people really should go to your website, Citizen Safety Academy, and look at all the stuff you guys offer. I mean, you guys offer some. I just can't say anything other than unique classes. Of course, you've got kind of common typical concealed carry permit classes, which is awesome. But you, like you said earlier, have non-shooting classes. You have home and business security classes, security guard training. Hey, I don't think I've ever seen anyone offer security, at least from the types of instructors that we are used to in
Right.
this, let's just say, the Rangemaster kind of world of the national scene. And then another really cool one is that you've got an assistant instructor training course. Can
Yes.
you talk about that a little bit? Because I've been training a couple of assistant instructors myself, but I'm sure I could use some help with that too. So that fascinates me. Could you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah. So it's funny. The AI class is a brainchild of Akil and me. It's another thing that sort of blossomed from our combining our two very diverse backgrounds. Um, I let's just say my training background was very sheltered for the first, I don't know, 10 years or so of my training career. I trained only with Tom and people trained by Tom. I had no idea what the rest of the world held as far as quality of training. I thought everybody was like Tom. And Akil is the opposite, and so when our worlds merged, a lot of ideas started coming to the fore. Like, for example, I cut my teeth as an instructor by AIing for Tom for 15 years. I'm a firm believer in apprenticeship, and I do think that it's a tragedy that so many people nowadays take a class, hit the bullseye, and then immediately hang up a shingle and start teaching classes. I'm like, wait a minute, you just started shooting. But I digress. I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a soapbox. I apologize. But I swept brass and hung targets for 15 years and took notes on how Tom taught and worked as an AI. And I learned that being an assistant instructor is a whole skill set unto itself. And I think that students and classes suffer when there are multiple multiple instructors, and the AIs don't understand the difference between an AI and a lead. You cannot have a cohesive unit if everybody doesn't understand where their roles stop and start. So Akil and I talked about this a lot, over dinner and after class, and we would go and train, and we would talk about how the AIs were sort of talking over the leads and things like that. And we would kind of complain about it. And so I would just start talking to him about the way we ran the AI program under Tom and what all you had to do in order to AI a class with him. And I would start saying, you should codify this. I mean, is this written down anywhere? And I was like, no, we just kind of did it. And so anyway, long story short, we did end up codifying it. We turned it into a class. At first, it was internal training for our AIs because ACH wanted to have the highest quality AIs for our students. But then people started commenting on it like, hey, this is such a well-oiled machine. What do you do behind the scenes? And that was what pushed us to finally open up the class to open enrollment. And it was local at first, and then we turned it into a webinar. So it became a 3-part webinar, which is available. We do have online training, by the way. You mentioned our diversity of offerings, and online training is one that we decided was worth our time after an initial bit of hesitation. And the AI class is just one of the classes that's available by webinar now on citizensafetyonline.com. In that class, we talk about something called the 4 C's, which are our formula for being an effective AI. If you want to know what the 4 C's are, sign up for the class. But it's a highly operationalized methodology for serving as an assistant instructor who does more than just sit in the back, hang out, spectate, watch, and occasionally run to the car and get something. Like there's a very specific job that has to be done by the AI. And if you do it well and do it properly, you prevent a whole lot of things that otherwise end up making the rounds on YouTube or Facebook or what have you. That's how everything's feels so seamless, is the AIs really are working hard behind the scenes.
That's awesome. And my wheels start turning about insurance and all that stuff. I'm assuming maybe that stuff comes up in these classes, or
Yeah, well, that comes up in all of our instructor level classes. But, a frequent question that we get is, do I need insurance as an AI? If I'm not the lead, do I need insurance? The answer is yes. And then leads will ask, well, is it my responsibility to insure my AIs? And that's a policy decision. It varies from organization to organization. So there's just, I really think I'm glad Akil talked me into moving forward with this class, because I thought nobody would care. I was like, we're the only ones nerdy enough to sit around talking about this stuff. And he said, no, I think it'll do well. We should do it. And I'm glad he did. It turned out to be one of our signature courses. But there's so much that goes into it. I mean, we have a whole block on classroom AI shift, and most people don't even think about working as an AI in the classroom. They think of that as just kind of, I sit in the back and, answer questions if somebody comes up to me on a break. There's so much that happens with the AIs in the classroom. You're profiling students, you're making notes, you're putting together plans for the range, you're figuring out who's left-handed, who's right-handed, who's fearful, who's overconfident, who's maybe triggered. You've got to figure out what mobility issues people have. You've got to scope all of this out, because the lead can't do that. The lead is busy teaching the class.
Yeah.
So, the AIs notice when people are shivering, when people are yawning, when people are distracted, or there's so much that happens. And we teach everything right down to how to set up the tables and chairs in the classroom. What is a distraction on the walls or on the floors? Where should you put your aisles for students to have relatively easy egress and ingress? There's a ton of stuff that goes into it. And then for range work, there's a whole block on range choreography. If you have an odd number of shooters on the line and you have one AI and one lead, where do you position yourselves? What are the different techniques for roving back and forth in order to fully cover your assigned area? Are you assigning areas to your AIs that they have to cover, or is everybody just kind of winging it? Are you assigning lanes to your students, or do you just tell them to line up wherever they want to go? All of this is covered in the AI class.
Nice. Sounds like a great class. And, a lot of us that are, I would say Aaron and I aren't new to teaching and instructing, but we're newer than some of the folks out there. And those are just excellent classes, just can make a lot of us a lot better. So it sounds awesome. Sounds like
Thanks.
a great class.
Thank you. It's fun to teach. I like that class.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, Eric, I think we're on to talking about one of our favorite topics here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go back to Tac-Con, Tiffany.
All right.
So first and foremost, for our audience members out there, if you've not been to Tac-Con, it should be at the top of your list. It's such an amazing event. Top world-class instructors, just teaching so much incredible, valuable information that'll make you so much better in the field of carrying your firearm, being safer, verbalization, all that medical, all you can think about. It is just an amazing event. And when Aaron and I went there for the first time, it was like, man, this is a heavenly place, just such a, we were so ecstatic. The first day, like, man, this is so amazing. Why is it taking us this long?
Remember what, Eric? Remember when we ran into Tom and said, hey, this is, I don't remember how exactly it came up. We said, yeah, this is the first time we've been here. He goes, where the fuck you been?
That was awesome.
Classic Tom.
Well, Tiffany, what we wanted to ask you is, number one, I mean, we kind of have an idea, but how did your involvement at the level that you're in, how did that happen? How did it progress? And, just tell us the story on that.
Wow. A trip down memory lane. So if you rewind back to that very first class that I took, that we talked about earlier, that was how I met Tom. And from that point on, for some reason, Tom just sort of took me under his wing. And I would come to Rangemaster and just kind of hang out. I would just be there in the lobby. I'd come there and do my homework. I'd come there and fall asleep on the couch.
Nice.
And Tom would just walk out of his office and say, follow me. And whatever I was doing, I would stop it and run and follow Tom. And we'd go on the range and he'd run through things with me. And so he really took an interest in my development, and I'm forever grateful for that. I still, to this day, I always joke that I have no idea what he saw in me because I was just some random chick. But I'm so glad he saw it, whatever it was. And so that relationship developed, and he would continually ask me, to do this, do that, see this, watch this. Can you attend here? And I would start helping out around the range with the newsletter and with AIing for him and things like that. And so I would just be kind of hanging around. And finally, one Tac-Con, I was there, and he said, he asked me to do some, menial administrative task, like check people in at the door or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And from there, he just, started entrusting me with more and more responsibility with Tac-Con, and it's grown from there. And now here we are, where I play a huge role, and it's an extreme honor. And I just every year hope to not let him and Lynn down and not let the attendees down, because it's such a huge event, and it is the highlight of many people's training year. So, so that I don't take that lightly, and it's a big responsibility, but it's also a blast, and I absolutely.
Well, we don't see you disappointing anybody, especially not Tom and Lynn and then of course the attendees, because it's an amazing event and it just keeps
Thank you.
getting better and better. So
Thank
Well, and it's the main thing is it with as much as is going on, crisscrossing of schedules and you know students going in between here and there. I mean, the way that to have as much content as is offered there, there's got to be a lots of overlapping of classes, etc. But it's managed so well. You just kind of, we all, people that don't know, of course everybody likes to shoot, so you got to pick your favorite choices of shooting classes, and Tom
you.
will assign you those, whichever ones he can work out for you to get on, and then you're free to choose all the other classes that you want, and it's just a smorgasbord. But again, with all that's going on, there's clearly a lot of good administrative management going on. And that stuff is not easy,
It's
especially for, I mean, I think there's usually around 500 or so people there. I'm off the top of my head.
Yeah, just shy of that. But you're right. There's a ton of moving parts, and there are a lot of interested parties, a lot of, vendor contracts, and it's not just, hey, let's meet at the range, right?
yeah.
You've got to coordinate schedules, you've got to coordinate travel, you've got to get insurance, you've got to make sure that everything's covered, you've got to make sure that your activities are within the zoning permit for the facility, you've got to make sure that you keep the board happy at the range, you've got a suburban community just on the other
Yep.
side of the berm. You've got to keep
Yes.
that in mind, got to manage the hotel and the lodging, and make sure that chains of command and communication are very clear, because, what happens at the hotel, what happens on the range, what happens in transit, where does one person's responsibility stop and another's start? And then with the instructors, I mean, this year we had almost 50 instructors, and some taught multiple classes, some had classes that repeated. They also wanted to take classes, so we had to be careful to manage all of that. We also have a huge staff of RSOs, range safety officers, who are volunteers. And so, because they're volunteering, we want to make sure they get to take the classes that they want to take.
Mhm.
But we also have to staff the shooting classes with the RSOs. And so it's a million pieces. And it really does take a whole team of people to keep all the trains running on time, so to speak. And I am just one of many. There's tons of folks who work on this. Akil works hard on it. The entire staff, John Hearn, Lee Weems, Chris Norwell works a lot with the RSOs, and he does a lot with logistics. Julie and Laura, they work a lot with the registration. Obviously, Lynn's really involved. Martin Hofert is really the glue that keeps Tac-Con running. And he's probably the unsung hero of Tac-Con. He's a name that not everybody may be familiar with, but if we didn't have Martin Hofert from Memphis, Tennessee, he hails from the old mothership days. If we did not have him at TACCon, it would all fall apart. I guarantee. Um, so there's a lot going on. Will Dugan now is lead over the pistol match, because that's the other thing. There's also a pistol
Oh yeah.
match that goes on the entire weekend, concurrent to the 9 tracks of training that are running. And so it's a little different from other conferences in that you don't pick one class to stay in all day long. There are 2-hour classes and 4-hour classes, and you can take as many as 4 classes in a day. Um, and we've got to make sure that people can get from one class to another, that they know where they're going, that everything is walkable. Like, we've got to make sure there's water on site, and IFACs, and it's just there's a whole lot that goes into it. How do you feed people at lunch? Got to coordinate the food trucks. There's a lot that happens, And as you said, it's not just shooting. There are shooting classes, but there's also dry fire classes. There's also classroom blocks, lectures. There's hands-on blocks. There's medical, legal, combatives. So it's ammunitions and force on force. It's a lot.
Well, and Tiffany, what I would like to bring up is, as much as we love shooting, I mean, we all, I mean, I would say most of us that are doing this love shooting. But the one thing that I realized is that I'm like, I could probably do 2 less shooting classes so I can get in more lectures, because the
Greg
lectures.
Ellifritz posted something along those lines in the Tac-Con Facebook group last year, I believe it was. And he said something along the lines of, the true gold of Tac-Con is in the classroom blocks.
Mhm.
Everybody takes for granted that, I'm going to a shooting conference, I want to go shoot. And shooting is fun. We want to make noise. It's cool. You get that instant gratification when you bing and, you see the little hole. And that's all great. But the lectures really, really are just worth their weight in gold.
Oh
And
yeah.
I hear probably a dozen times every year people who say they went to TACCON, did not fire a single shot, and found it 100% worth their money. And that's that's a common refrain. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the classes are amazing. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I can say that unfortunately, once again, Eric's work is holding him back from going. But I did
Thanks
get
for
it.
reminding me.
I'm sorry, bro. But I did want to at least mention that I will be there here 2025.
Awesome.
I'm really stoked. We last year, 2024, we literally missed the window. I don't know what we were doing. Tom would probably have some choice words to say what we were probably doing, but somehow we missed it, and boy, we were disappointed. But
Well,
so at
Eric, get
least,
on that waiting list if you haven't already, because we do have people to drop out. I mean, we're still a year out, so waiting list.
Yeah, and what it boils down to, unfortunately, is it's work related.
Oh, I
So
see. Okay.
yeah,
Well,
or else I would have pulled the trigger just like Aaron did. But yeah, it's work. My day job has been a little bit hectic this year and the next year.
you
Um,
understand.
yeah,
Eric's not in the army, but he's in the army.
yeah, yeah.
It's really a way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, I do certainly work for the Army as a civilian, and it's been a little nuts this year, and
Yeah,
next year's not changing a whole lot, but I do love my job. I'm very
great.
lucky that I do love my job. Now, not to say that Aaron and I, I plan on retiring in about 6 years, and Aaron and I doing the EvoSec full time, so
Nice.
looking forward to that as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and the fact that you will be back here
Yep.
in Oklahoma, and I'm
Yep.
holding you to that, bro. I'll be real pissed if that
Oh,
changes.
well, what I would say to that, Aaron, is there's no way that's not going to happen, because it's time to get back home to the family.
Yeah,
You know,
good. Well, I'll tell you what. This has been a fun conversation. I it's I bet that a lot of people just love hearing this more kind of behind the scenes stuff. You know, talking about being an instructor. We a lot of what we do on here is, there's lots of technique, talk about shooting and combatives and everything. But I mean, we're proud to say that our audience is pretty darn astute, and we've got a lot of instructors and people that are really deep in this game that are fans of our show. We're proud of that. But so, in other words, I think a lot of those people are going to have fun listening to this class. So, I mean, this show,
Got
getting
class
those.
on the brain.
Yes, I do.
Well, it is a passion of mine, and I happen to think that I wish the instructor class in the training community focused more on learning how to teach in
yeah,
addition to just learning how to shoot.
yep,
That's shooting's fun, and of course you got to know what you're doing before you can teach it. but it often gets taken for granted, I think, that the art of instruction is its own art form.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Absolutely.
an entirely separate skill set. And just because you're good at the thing doesn't mean you're good at teaching the thing.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of the technical aspects of andragogy and instructional design and educational philosophy and psychology, cognitive psychology. And we get into some of that in the Gateway Instructor course because it's really critically important, particularly with teaching reticent students, and also introducing humans, particularly adults, to a brand new skill. So we get into some of those philosophical details of teaching, and we have a webinar, actually. Speaking of our online classes, one of the online classes besides the AI class is a class called Building Your Firearms course, and
Oh.
part one of that class is instructional design. Part two is lesson planning and outlining, things like that. A lot of instructors don't ever have the opportunity to actually learn the technical skill behind drafting a lesson plan. There are some very hardcore do's and don'ts, some clear mistakes that you can make in lesson planning. The biggest mistake you can make is not having a lesson plan,
Oh
so
yeah.
just just things like that. Akil and I, we really are passionate about building more skillful instructorship. So I'm excited to hear that that's a topic of interest for your audience, and I hope that they get something out of this conversation.
Well, and for us as well, we'll certainly be getting on those online classes and
Well,
then getting into some of your live classes as soon as we can.
the point is, right, is, and no one, I'm not going to call out any individuals, but I've been to lots of local classes where it was just that the teachers had some pretty good knowledge and experience,
Mhm.
and they were showing students all this stuff, and yet the students had no idea why they were learning what they were learning, how it was applicable, learning lots of stuff that wasn't applicable to the students themselves. It's so on our end at the local and consider what we consider the gateway, or the level of instruction that we can bridge the gap between, unfortunately, these instructors at the local level where people aren't getting great classes. Let's just be frank. But we can also continually learn under Tom and Craig and your group, and witness amazing instructors and try and bring some of that to the local level. And then, hey, at the end, hey, here are my mentors. You really need to take some of their classes too.
It's so funny that you say that, Aaron. That's exactly what Akil and I did. We went through a phase where, as is fashionable, we kind of poo-pooed the NRA and the USCCA.
Hmm.
And I know you mentioned earlier about my being a training counselor for USCCA. I'm also a training counselor for the NRA.
Okay.
And Akil and I, we just reached a point where, we were so constantly trashing the instruction that came out of the NRA, because a lot of it is trash, until finally we sort of looked in the mirror and we were like, yeah, but the vast majority of people who don't know the training world and want to enter it, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
They're going to end up with an NRA instructor. That's number one. And number two, we're complaining so much, but what are we doing about it? And we were both kind of embarrassed, and we sort of hung our heads and we said, we can't keep complaining if we're not going to do anything about it. So we both started teaching NRA classes. We both became NRA training counselors. And what we do is teach the NRA curriculum the way a beginner firearms course should be taught.
Yeah.
The curriculum itself is not horrible. Now, there's certainly some things in there that I will quibble with, but overall, it's not a bad program. it's just really hard to have any quality control over instructorship when you have 130,000 instructors across the nation, so we said, let's do this, attract people who only know firearms instruction as a product of the NRA or the USCCA, and introduce them to how it should be done. And we do exactly what you just said, Aaron. As we get folks in our classes who want to teach permit classes, so they just want to get that instructor certification, but they've never heard of Tom Gibbons of Mass AU, John Farnham, or they know nothing about that broader world. We put all those names up on the board and we introduce them to all these people, and we tell them, no no self-respecting firearms instructor can go on teaching classes without having heard of Tom Gibbons, John Farnham, Mass AU. You have to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
You have to know the shoulders on which you stand. And we've had a lot of success there. We've had opened up some hearts and minds to folks who said, wow, I didn't realize it was this deep. And we were like, yeah, yeah, there's a lot more to it than the NRA.
And that is a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I am a basic pistol instructor for NRA, but maybe I should pick that back up. It was just I did have a little bit of a poor experience with the people that I was working with.
Yeah.
But I'm sure with the more years of experience that I have teaching and being trained, I could probably negotiate that stuff, juggle it all a little bit better.
Oh yeah,
but
I'm sure you could. That's what we found, because like I said, we walked away from the NRA for years because my experience was so horrible. I mean, I'm embarrassed to repeat some of the things that my NRA instructor told me. And I hate that, I wonder how many students were trained by that guy in the interim. And that was part of what made Akil and me decide that we were going to go ahead and, head up to Virginia and train to be training counselors. And we did. And we've been doing the instructor classes ever since.
Awesome.
Well, and I frankly think that it's very, very admirable or laudable of you guys to say, hey, if we dislike it and we, bag on it all the time, what are we going to do to help make it better? And there's a lot of us that can take that attitude and change our thought process, frankly.
Thanks.
So
it's certainly not for everyone.
Right.
It's not, so I don't mean that to disparage anybody who has made the conscious decision. I will not take NRA classes and I will not teach NRA classes. That is a way to go. Perfectly understandable. But that was, Akil and I decided, particularly because we work in the gateway space, and part of our mission is to attract people who are just knocking on the door, who are curious about this whole world. A lot of them are going to assume that the NRA is the entry point. And we'll never be able to teach them otherwise unless we meet them at that entry point.
Yes.
So
interesting. Well
put.
It's been a lot of fun picking your brain about this side of things, because we all know that, as we've just been talking about, that the quality of instruction and the way that students get into this world, they can either be ran off or their lives can be changed, like yours.
Like mine. Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So this actually brings us to the most important question of the show. Okay. And that is, what are your 3 favorite bands and or musicians?
Okay.
Did you see that question?
Yes.
Or did I take you by surprise?
I like that one. So I will say, first of all, that I'm not a very good fan, like devotee of
Oh, that's all right.
of anything. So when I say my favorites, I hope I don't get quizzed on Facebook about it, because I'm not
Uh,
the one who like memorizes lyrics and all that kind of stuff. But as far as just enjoying music, my favorites are probably Busta Rhymes, Janet Jackson, and CeeLo Green.
oh, all great ones. I really dig CeeLo Green for sure.
Yeah, and
He's
Janet
a
Jackson. If if you're a child of the '80s,
uh-huh.
um, and you don't have great memories from hearing Janet Jackson songs, something's wrong.
Well, I said that I don't memorize lyrics, but I do memorize dance routines, and I know all of Janet's routines.
Oh wow!
Well,
We need to put you on the spot sometime, and we want to see some of that.
Nope, this is radio, not television.
let's see. Let me think about.
Oh, we
So,
got a camera going. I'm just kidding. I'm just
so
kidding with
okay,
you.
you said be put on the spot. So okay, do the dance for Escapade right now.
No, not doing it. No. I do know it though. I will tell you that. And so fun fact, I'll throw this out there. I'm sorry to keep dragging out the conversation, but
no.
That's what we're
We
here
love
for.
talking.
Conversation.
so once I was interviewing John Holshin, and one of the questions was, what non-gun related thing has most informed your training career in firearms? And for me, it is dance.
Oh wow.
And
Awesome.
dance, I my dance days are long gone. That was many surgeries and many pounds ago. But I did have a pretty intense period of dance, and that's one of the things that I've taught. I love teaching, and I've taught a whole bunch of random things. And dance is one thing that I have taught. And
Oh cool.
yeah, and having that experience of knowing intuitively where your body is in space really has transferred over and informed my experience as a student of pistolcraft.
Boy, that makes a lot of sense, and it's that you just kind of blew my mind because I've never thought of something like that. That's cool.
Yeah,
It's like
well, I mean,
another.
it's a martial art. And so it really has. There's been so many times where I have leaned on my history in dance to solve problems with a gun in my hand. I can't even tell you how many times, even without a gun, just the defensive principles that undergird all of the things that we learn in our defense training. Simple things like how to fall. I've seen Cecil teach how to fall, and I learned that in dance. And
Nice.
there are things that happen intuitively. There are ways that I move my arms when I've got an injury to compensate and to still accomplish a solid grip. And there's all kinds of negotiation, physical and physiological negotiation that you can do if you are fluently aware of every muscle in your body. And dance helped me with that.
Well, Tiffany, dance, just like music, our instruments behind us. Aaron and I were also artists of, various mediums, paint, all of that. And, we mention fairly often, Miyamoto Musashi, the, famous samurai, that he always mentioned how important pure art was for the martial artist. And so dance is absolutely an art. So, for the development of your martial art. So yeah, I think that's awesome.
And see now why we asked this question? Because how many people know that you used to teach dance and that all of Janet Jackson's choreography?
I've done a fair bit of podcasts, and I do get some of the same questions over and over again. And I think you may have cracked new ground on that one. I can't
Awesome.
remember ever talking about that before. So there you
That's
go.
what we like
About
to do.
music or the dancing?
Both.
Cool.
Both.
Well,
that was Kelly McCann's response too.
Really?
Kelly McCann was excited about the music for certain.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
It's a fun question, and we do not have a first time interview without asking that question.
That is a
because
fun question.
yeah,
I usually get books, favorite books, but I've never been asked favorite bands or songs or musicians. So
Aaron doesn't like me to ask about books.
oh, I don't mind you asking
I,
about
I'm
books.
I'm playing, Aaron. No, there's just been a few times where I think that because of course, Aaron, you're a reader as well, but obviously I probably do a little more reading because it's a very important pastime to mine. So I am very inclined to ask about books. But there was just a few times, Aaron, I could tell you felt like it was starting to get trite at the beginning. And I have grown to where I don't ask about books as much anymore because we have so many other subjects to talk about too. But you know, I've done some book reviews, and that's something I still want to do a little more of in some cases where it's just Aaron and I. But yeah,
But
yeah. So
books are awesome, but it's fun to end what may have been a cerebral conversation
yeah.
with something fun.
yeah,
So,
for sure. With a
well,
question though, it also gives people a chance to to show a little bit of the why behind being an everyday carrier. And I stress that with my students. Again, sorry to drag the conversation out. This is the last point I'll
No,
make, I
no,
promise.
no. You have no. You can keep talking as long as you want. Don't worry about that.
Well, we were talking earlier about shooting and how much fun it is, and I do think that there's a tendency to get kind of so wrapped up in the shooting part that we almost neglect the why. And right now, I'm just talking about everyday carriers, people in the defensive world. If you're an athlete or hunter, those are different categories. But for self defense, you have to keep the why in mind. And
mm,
we just left the conference, Akil and I, where we were talking to a bunch of ladies about how to choose a holster and things like that. And we went through the whole spiel about how a holster, an everyday carry holster, a defensive holster, has to be comfortable. And I have a whole soapbox about that, because I grew up in the era where people were still barking silly things like, "Oh, it's supposed to be comforting, not comfortable,"
yeah,
that kind of BS. And I'm
yeah,
like, that's crap. Um, the whole point of carrying a gun for me is to preserve the life that I have built for myself. And if in the process of protecting that life, I have to upend it or make myself miserable, I've defeated my entire purpose. So, to bring this back around to books, I'm always curious on podcasts when people are asked what their favorite books are, because usually they tend to kind of name the shooting books. And I'm like, that's great, but why do you shoot? Who are you? What is the you that the gun is protecting? There's got to be more to your life than just shooting.
yeah,
So, and that's not, I love all of that. That's great. And especially for the history buffs out there, who take those deep dives. Hey, more power to you. I wish I had the brain power to do that. But I also like reading poetry,
yeah.
or just like going to a museum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a blast.
Just
D-
things like that.
And
So
do you like to read fiction as well?
not as much. I theoretically like fiction, but my brain struggles with it
Ah,
because I have attention deficit issues.
okay.
And I
Yeah.
can't get through. I can't get through it. I would love to, and I own lots of fiction books, but I have very specific techniques for reading them a bit at a time. I jump
Mhm.
around the book and then put the puzzle back together, retro. I like reverse engineer it, because I've got a very short attention span. And honestly, it's one of the gifts that training has given me. Akil makes fun of me, but we talk about the philosophical front sight.
Ah,
And
nice.
what that is for an OCD ridden ADHD girl like me, um, being able to focus on a single point in time and space is a luxury. And it's a discipline that I apply across my entire life, regardless of whether there's a gun anywhere near me.
Nice. That's an excellent way to look at it for certain.
Well, I think we've got a lot of great topics that we've covered, and again, the little delve into a little bit of humanity and actually a little deeper personal ways that you think. That's why we actually ask that music question, because it usually delves into stuff like this, and it's fun. It's an excuse to go to get people like you and people like when you got Craig Douglas or Tom Givens. Now, Tom doesn't get as warm and fuzzy about this stuff, but get people to really talk deeper about themselves, because rarely ever does someone, even if they aren't a huge music fan, rarely does someone ever. I mean, I can name them, but I won't name them. We've probably had 2 guests that one actually said they wouldn't answer the question.
Yep.
And then the other one was majorly stumped by it.
Yep.
Everybody
I know
else
exactly
gets,
who the 2 are.
and you would know both of them too.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe they have other pastimes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a great time, and we essentially have first time interviews, and that's why we call it the first time, so that we can hopefully have you back. Hopefully you've had a good enough time to come back and talk with us again sometime.
Yeah, it was super fun. Thank you for having me. And again, sorry I kept droning on and on at the end.
No, we're here to talk. We have a podcast. We like to talk.
Yeah.
So keep us talking.
You don't have to apologize to us, because we can jabber on and on.
We didn't even get to talk about like twin stuff, so we'll have to
No,
do that
we didn't.
time.
Hey,
that's the next show. We do need to talk about twin stuff.
Well, what we'll have to do is have you and Akil on at the same time, something like that, because I think that would be fun too.
That would be great.
But well, then that brings us to the time to bid good night. And I bet you have some legal briefs or something, or you about to get on a plane to do something really above what some of us can tackle tomorrow. You'll be doing, but
doing
thank
John
you so much.
Grisham stuff.
No.
Getting certified in another state to practice law, I guess. So,
nope, no more for me.
All right, y'all. Well, have a good night. It's been fun. We'll talk to you soon, Tiffany.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Tiffany.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one, Aaron.
Life is like painting with electric eels, 1,000 paper keys.